your channel
His plague.
to YouTube.
Come for me, big dog.
Good morning, good evening, YouTube. Salutations, wherever you're at. So I thought I'd go ahead and do like a best of 2025 read for me. I probably should have made this a few weeks ago, but I've been really busy and I've been doing this buddy read with my buddy Kivislav, and I just haven't had time to do a bunch of recording. So if everything looks the exact same, it's because I did a bunch of pre-recorded videos. So, this will be a bit of a top 10. I'm not going to cover every single book. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on every book I've read or all of these. This isn't every book I read last year, but I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on each and every book. Last year I probably read right around 60 books, but all year long I also read magazines. So there are magazines I get regularly all throughout the year, and then I also read short stories. So those don't really count towards books, but I also spent a good chunk of the year language learning. I spent probably about 3 months out of the year last year just learning French, working on my French. So I don't always do that every year, and there are multiple languages I work on. On top of French, I've learned a lot of Haitian Creole and Spanish, although I haven't touched Spanish in a couple years now, even though I could use a refresher on it. And eventually I'm going to spend some time on Persian, so there's a couple other languages I'm interested in, but those are like the four main I really like a lot. So, well, there's actually a book in here of another language I like, but it's a little bit harder to get learning material for, but these are in no particular order, and I'm going to spend the most time on the last one. So, this is Master and Commander by Patrick O'Brien. I had read a little bit of this series before, and I've always really liked it, but this is really great. This is the Abi Maturin series. I highly recommend these. I really love these covers, too. The drawn covers, like the drawings on these are excellent. I love that they use drawings instead of like digital art, or I love painted covers too, but as a person who likes to draw, I'm always really drawn by stuff like this. So this is a really great series. Check this out, Master and Commander, Patrick O'Brien. I don't know when I'll get back to it because I got so many reading projects going on, but definitely check this out. Highly recommend it. I'll put this one up here. This is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. This is a phenomenal book. This is actually if you're into historical fiction, which is my favorite genre, Gates of Fire is a pretty important work when it comes to historical fiction. It's a pretty well-known book. This basically covers the stand of Thermopylae and the Spartan 300. But what I really liked about this book is he makes it pretty clear that it wasn't just the Spartans there, that there were other Greek cities and other Greek tribes involved. There's a little bit of a coming to age story in the beginning. And it has a very tragic ending, and it's all told kind of in the past tense from the main character's point of view. This is a very good book. The ending's really great. Everything about this book is fantastic. Definitely check this out. I'm gonna read some more Stephen Pressfield. I don't know when I'm gonna get to it though. This is a good book right here. This is French from Dialect to Standard. So, as obviously you heard me talk about in the beginning, just outside of reading, I also have an interest in linguistics and language learning. So this book right here, so this is nonfiction, and I read a lot of books like this. I actually have maybe two others in this stack here that are just kind of linguistic stuff. So this covers kind of like the history of French, and it just talks about how French has changed over time, and even modern French, and how different modern French is from older literary French, like what we would consider modern French now. Something you might not know about French is it's on a huge dialect continuum, on top of like Occitan, and then like even Catalan is very similar to French in a lot of ways. Catalan is very much a mixture of Spanish and French. That's not a fair description of it, but you can kind of think of it that way. So talks about a lot about the standardization of French as the language. If you don't know that much about French, there's a lot of obviously there's liaison, which isn't really written in French, although there are ways to write it like in a IPA way, like where it kind of shows you how it's pronounced, but that's not the way you typically write French, right? Well, never. Just in instances when you want to show how something's pronounced. So a lot of stuff, and then all the Ellison that's in French, which is something we do in English a lot too, which is like word contractions. But it's just a fascinating subject. French is just one of my favorite languages to learn for that reason. I love the history of it, everything about it, and I nerd out when it comes to this stuff. I like reading grammars of languages. I just think it's really interesting. Anyway, really fascinating book. I definitely, if you're interested in linguistics at all, I would check this out. This is a very good book. But like I said, it just covers the history of it. If you don't know that much about the French language, modern French is very different. They've supplanted the third person plural with what we would consider like a second person singular pronoun, and which does make it speaking French a little easier because it's less verb conjugation. But anyway, really great read. Check this out if you haven't read it. And so I got a couple of these on here actually. So I try to reread a couple of books a year. I don't let it dominate my reading. And I do it in a couple different ways. And since I'm talking a little bit about rereading, I'll just mention this. This isn't how I did this, but I think Audible and audiobooks are really, I think rereading, like if it's a book you've already read, I really think it does well as an audiobook format. Because I especially when it comes to like fiction, I don't love fiction stories on audiobook, but I think when it's a reread, it works really well, or if it's something short. So, but anyway, I actually did read this, but just since we're talking about rereading, this is Shogun by James Clavell. I watched the TV show this year. I didn't watch the whole thing. I have a hard time sticking with TV shows for some reason nowadays. Since I've gotten older, I just don't like watching TV that much. But this is a fantastic book, and watching that series just made me want to read this again. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is a top 5 favorite book for me. I read this a really long time ago for the first time, and I've probably read it now like 4 or 5 times in my life. This book is what made me interested in language learning, because the main character in this has to learn Japanese, which is obviously very different, not just from English, but all European languages. Everything about Japanese is very different compared to English. And I just remember reading this and thinking, if this guy could learn English in his 30s, I could learn, French or Spanish, when I was 19 or 20 or whatever at the time. So this is a fantastic book. It's very much like it is basically like going to an alien world for this guy. I won't get too much into the plot because I don't want to spend too much time on these books, but this is a fantastic read. Check out Shogun if you've never read it. Another very important work of historical fiction. Sorry, I got to bend down a little bit. Maybe I'll try to edit some of that out of there. Again, this is me just kind of nerding out. This is French Creoles, and it's just like a comprehensive grammar. This actually covers several languages, although it doesn't cover Haitian Creole that much. You would think it would, because Haitian Creole is the most spoken Creole language in the world. But it basically will take several different examples of some French Creole languages, like French. So French is like the substrate language, so that means it's like the dominant supplier of vocabulary. And it just compares them, and it's really interesting. It might sound really boring, but at least to me, in my nerdy mind, this was a fascinating read. And it's really interesting to see how similar these languages are, despite the fact they are on separate islands from each other in many cases. How is that possible? How does that happen? It's amazing. It's incredible. And I think I find it so fascinating, man. And this is just a fantastic book. And it talks about just the similarities in their grammar, what they do different from French, why some of this stuff developed from French. If Patrick Book Reviews see this, I'll go and this is a good chance for me to talk about this. So Patrick Book Reviews recently, he talked about my channel in a video. I'll tag him. And he talked a little bit about, because he knows I like languages, so he talked a little bit about Thai. So something really interesting about French, I don't know if Patrick knows anything about French or not. In standard French, when they make questions, and they don't do this as much as they used to, they use a term, it's est que, right? And it literally translates in English to like, is it that it is, right? Basically. So in English, it's very clumsy to say, even though you could say, is it that? But to say, is it that it is kind of like, it'd be very clunky to say in English. But in French, it's become so common, they just throw it in the beginning of a sentence, and it makes it into a question, right? Now, modern French has gone more to intonation to give, to ask questions. But the point is that's a really common way to make questions in French, and a very easy way to do it. In many Creole languages, they have taken that est que, which has a literal translation in English, Whereas in these Creole languages, it is no longer, it's lost that meaning, those individual word meanings. And in like Haitian Creole, for example, it's just eski. It's just a word. It's even become a noun that means question. So on top of it just being a question marker that you can just throw on top of a sentence and make it into a question, and it has no meaning on its own, except now that it's started to develop this meaning of a noun too, which is like what would be equivalent to our word question. But anyway, which is also a French-based word in English. Anyway, really interesting subject. I know not everyone's going to be into that, so I think I cheated a little bit on this list. But I got another linguistic book. I won't spend too much on it because a lot of people probably won't be interested in it. But this is a written Afrikaans. It's like basically just talks about the standardization of Afrikaans and the history of Afrikaans. Afrikaans is very similar to English, and this book talks a lot about that and the English influence on Afrikaans. This is much more kind of really all three of these linguistic books I mentioned are kind of academic, but they're really interesting subjects. The French one, the first French one I mentioned, the standardization, that just about anybody could read that. These other two, you'd have to know a little bit about grammar to understand these, but the point is this is a very fascinating book. I don't know how many linguistic books I'll get to this year because I've read a lot over the last couple of years, but this was a great read, man, and I'll probably reread this at some point because I really like. I just think Afrikaans is fascinating. It's just so interesting how it came to be. And this book I read kind of late in the year. This is I got two more here. I missed two, so I'll cover this one real quick. This is Musashi. So Musashi cover is I don't know how much it's like accurate, but it covers the famous swordsman Musashi. It's basically about his life. It's kind of like a biography, but I think it's like fictional. But I don't know that for sure. I don't know enough about Japanese culture and their history to know that for sure. But he wrote some important works. Not only was he a very famous swordsman, but he also wrote some important works of Japanese literature. One of them is like an instruction. It's like an instructional book about being a swordsman, but I guess it has a lot of wisdom and stuff in it too. Really great, really fascinating read. But like I said, that's more fiction, so it's got a really great narrative. There's like a love story in it. It's very good though. So this right here, I don't think I've ever seen anybody talk about this book. Besides those, obviously those linguistic books, so those are a little niche, but this is Bel Ami by Guy de Pissant. So I was learning French, working my French this year, and I found in a French language abridged version of like the first 80 pages of this. And I read that in French, and then I was like, man, I really want to finish this. So I ended up reading the rest of this in English. This is a fantastic book. If you've never seen this, you should you should definitely read this, man. It is very interesting, a very excellent book. He's basically like the main character is like a bit of a ne'er-do-well wanderer in the beginning, and his friend kind of basically gets him a job as like a journalist, although he's never been a journalist or a writer of any kind. And then he kind of gets mixed up in like high society in Paris, and it's just a really good book. And he starts kind of like having relationships with these high up women who are married. But it's just a really good book, man. It's a really great read. Definitely check this out. So this is the only one I did in order. This is The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. This was my favorite read of the year. So this and Shogun were actually rereads for me. But I hadn't read this. I think I read this in like 2013. So it'd been a really long time. I had some memory of it, but not much. And I was inspired to read this by the Winter King TV show that I only watched the first episode of, but it made me want to read this again. This was phenomenal. This is one of my favorite literary anything of all time. If I cheat and count this as one book, this would be in my top 5 favorite books ever. So this is written by Bernard Cornwell, my all-time favorite, fiction author. I'd highly, highly recommend these. If you like fantasy, if you like historical fiction, I really think you'll like this. I won't go too much into who Bernard Cornwell is. He is a British author, so that could be a little bit jarring for somebody who hasn't read a lot of British authors, because there's a lot of sort of Britishisms in it, like the collective nouns. He uses the plural for it, so it's kind of like, and especially because there's a lot of military stuff in his book, so it's kind of like the regiment are coming, stuff like that. But what's another one, like the company, the company are, the company are here. You know, the company just are gonna go. You know, or going to go. So it's like that. It uses a lot of collective nouns, and then also like haven't for negating possession. So like I haven't a key, I haven't a clue, I haven't an idea of what to do, right? So there's like they don't use don't anyway, or doesn't. They just use haven't for possession specifically. But these are fantastic. This is Bernard Cornwell's take on the King Arthur mythos. And he kind of, what he does is he puts like a realistic Dark Age spin on it. So that's like kind of like accurate weaponry and armor, but like places, although he acknowledges that all the place names might not be accurate because there's just, we don't know enough for that. But this is just phenomenal. It's a great take on this. Lancelot is a scallywag scumbag in this. King Arthur is, I like King Arthur the most in The Winter King. The book is told it's like all in the first person, told by Durfel, who's a very much older Arthurian character. He's not really in the newer Arthurian, kind of literary scene, so much. But King Arthur is a bastard, and he is basically what it is, a horse lord, and what's kind of unique about him is his horses are like heavy cavalry horses, and he brings them back. He was in Brittany at the time when the book starts. I think it was in Brittany, either Brittany or France. But then he comes back to England to help. But anyway, so he brings these heavy cavalry horses with him, and it's really interesting to see. He puts a really good take on it because like a lot of the Saxons, it's during the Saxon invasion, right? And you might think like, oh, the Saxons are invading and just going through the island of England. That's not really how it worked, right? Like there was, they were there and they coexisted with the Brythonic people for hundreds of years, and then it slowly over time they kind of took over the British Isles, and it's just a really interesting take on it. And again, they're all like really dumbfounded by these horses and how big they are, and it's really interesting. It's a really great take on this stuff, and it's not shining armor. King Arthur, he's wearing a lot of leather and chainmail and stuff, and using kind of accurate, like more accurate, like shorter swords, and it's just really good. I do think they use some lances because, like I said, they're horsemen in it, but this is such a great read, man. I'm serious. This is just so good. Everything about it. I guess I wish I could articulate it better and really try to convince you guys to read this because it is fantastic. There's technically no magic in it, but there is some implied magic in it. Like maybe it was magic. Who knows? Because Merlin isn't a magician in this. He's more like a master of disguise and knows multiple languages, and you can kind of see how at that time with their superstition, So another thing about it, because he's a druid, they use what we would consider maybe like a farmer's almanac. So there's all these druid writings of how to predict, weather, and one of them's one of the things he kind of does and predict and kind of uses to make it seem like he's magic is the aurora borealis, the northern lights, and it kind of predicts when it's going to happen. And then when everyone sees it, it's like, oh, this is great, fire in the sky, magic. Anyway, this book is these are great. Check these out. I'm serious. This was my favorite read of 2025. Even though it's technically a reread for me, I enjoyed these so much. I will read these again in my lifetime. I don't know when. Usually I don't come back to something for a couple of years at least, but these will get another read in my lifetime. Maybe 2 or 3 more. So I really enjoyed these a lot. But anyway, that was my top 10. I don't even know if I technically did 10 books, but it doesn't matter. So I think that's going to be all for today, YouTube. But if you get one thing out of this video, please read The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. They are great. I'm serious. I don't think I got anything else. So anyway, have a good day or good night, wherever you're at, YouTube.